let's get started. I am so excited to talk about the new shrubs, or excuse me, the new annuals and perennials. I'm doing a series of webinars tonight, of course, and then in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about all about tomatoes. And to everyone registered this evening, I'll be sending the links to the upcoming webinars as well. So we're going to talk about tomatoes in 2 weeks, and shrubs were on my mind because in about 3 weeks, we're going to talk all about shrubs, all the many different types of shrubs that we can plant in this area. And the final one, which is about March 11th, we're going to talk about how to get flowering containers to do a little better for our area. So again, to everyone that is registered to this evening, I will be sending the links to all those future webinars as well. Now, my wife Mary and I love growing flowers around our house in South Fargo. I guess it just makes everything so colorful. And once it's in your blood, you really do enjoy it. And I love taking a walk around the yard in the evening. It's just fun to enjoy all the colors and to really soak in. And isn't that going to be fun again? To be out in our yards and gardens with everything growing and blooming. I'm really looking forward to it. And it's especially fun for me to try some new things. I like growing some of the old favorites, and we mentioned those too, but it's always fun to try something new. And the new materials that we talk about this evening are things that I've tried new and that have done really well for me. If we were to cover every new variety of annuals, perennials, gosh, I bet we could talk days on all those things. But I'm especially going to talk about the things that are kind of near and dear to my heart, things that have grown well for Mary and I. And I always figure if something does well for me, it'll probably do pretty good for other people as well. And so I'm a good test subject because as I've always said, if I can get something to grow, anybody can. So let's talk about the new annual varieties first. And of course, no discussion of new annual flower varieties would be complete without first talking about the All-America Selection winners. And there's the very recognizable logo from the All-America Selections organization. And that organization goes all the way back to about 1932. And what this is seed breeders, when they develop new varieties, we're going to focus on flowers tonight, but they also do vegetables. When seed breeders, plant developers, reach new varieties that they're especially proud of, they can submit these varieties to the All-America Selections organization. And that organization has some test gardens. And they have judges. They don't know what the flower name is or where it came from necessarily, but they test these new varieties beside the next best longtime contender. And if it's different enough or new enough or showy enough, it can get the coveted All-America Selection logo and designation. So when you're at the garden center and you see that familiar logo, you'll know that those have been tested. And certain gardens around the region are called All-America Selection display gardens, not doing the testing of the new, but display those that have already been designated as winners. And our flower beds at our home is designated a display garden. And so we receive the winners so that we can display them under home garden conditions. So we enjoy giving tours to garden clubs and etc. of these. So anyway, the first group that we talk about of new annuals is going to be these All-America Selection winners. Not all of them, but those that have done especially well in our own yard. So the first is Viking Extra Large Red on Chocolate, kind of a long name, but of course the name denotes that it's the very dark bronzy leaf and with a red flower. Now these have done especially well for us in pots and planters. They really do well. Now this photo isn't in our yard. I'm going to kind of tell you when a photo is in our own yard, but this one was supplied by the All-America Selection organization. I might also mention that hopefully you've got a pen and paper that you can jot down some of these names. I'll kind of go a little slow enough. And one thing I like to do when I'm viewing programs like this is try to get the name down. And then ones that you think are going to work for you, maybe just put a star beside them. Because sometimes you probably can't jot down everything about it. But at least if you put a star beside it, you'll know it's something maybe you want to try for yourself. And I found that this one, this Viking extra large red, really makes a nice, very showy plant. And they like morning sun, afternoon shade. They do well in full shade also. Oh, and gosh, this is a beauty. Petunia Carmen Wave Velour. And this is, of course, in the wave series, meaning it spreads out very beautifully and prolifically. Now, in our own flower beds, Carmen Wave Velour has been outstanding. It doesn't get very tall. It will only get maybe, 6 to 8 inches tall, but it spreads all the way out. And so if you have a flower bed where you'd like a mass planting, this one is absolutely beautiful. It can also be used in pots and planters, maybe in combination with something else because it doesn't give a whole lot of height. So maybe something else combined with it for height. But gosh, it is beautiful. The color and even the photo, you can almost touch that velvety substance on that. So a very, very beautiful one. I might make a little note too about where do you get these. Now, of course, our locally owned garden centers can't handle every possible variety of new ones that come out, but you might ask and see if they do have these. These are all also available for seed if you buy seed. If you enjoy starting your own plants from seed, petunias, we usually get those going in our basement underlights around the first part of March or so. And here's one that's done really well for us too in our flower beds. A Zinnia Profusion red and yellow bicolor. Now the Profusion series is a fairly low growing zinnia. Maybe 8 inches tall or so and kind of spreading outward beautifully. Now these work well in pots and planters. And of course, the Profusion zinnias, like all zinnias, love it hot and they'll take some dryness, full sun. If you've got a spot where other things are difficult to grow, zinnias usually will fill the bill. Isn't that a pretty two-tone? That is nice. And I found in our own flower beds, this is a picture of our own flower bed. What is beautiful about this is as the season goes on, notice the kind of rose colored tones. You've got the red and yellow bicolor, but it starts developing these interesting tones of, what would you call that? Kind of a dusty rose. So a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful zinnia. All right, now we go to another begonia. This one is called Viking Explorer Rose on Green, meaning that it's rose-colored flower, of course, on green foliage. Now, this begonia, I've noticed, likes to kind of hang over the edge of the pot a little bit. This would be beautiful in hanging baskets. Again, likes morning sun, afternoon shade, or full shade for these begonias like this. Viking Explorer Rose on Green. Coleus, there have been so many, many beautiful coleus developed, and this is one of them, the All-America Selection Premium Sun Coral Candy. The color, it was interesting. It's even a little more vibrant than the photo here that was supplied by All-America Selections. Really, really nice. It can do perfectly well in shade, but this is one of the series of coleus also that can do fairly well in sun. And I mean, fairly well, beautiful in sun. Now, this snapdragon turned out very beautifully for us. Look at the color, an interesting color on a snapdragon called double shot orange bicolor. So it's kind of a doubled flower. Notice the kind of more roughly texture to these. The color is really nice. Now, the height of these in our own flower garden, I suppose got up to, let's see, I'd say probably 12 to 16 inches, so not a real tall snapdragon. These would be perfectly beautiful in a pot or planter, also a combination. Now, this snapdragon, like many of the snapdragons, after it's produced its first flush, they tend to set some seeds, where each of the flowers were. They'll develop a little seed pod. And so I did with these the same as I do with all of our snapdragons. After that first flush, I cut them way back. That removes the developing seed head, because you see, an annual's goal in life is to flower, produce seed, so it'll perpetuate the species, and then, of course, they die. And so, if you can prevent the seed set on many of these annuals, it'll keep blooming longer. Very noticeable in snapdragons. So, with the double shot orange, as well as our other snapdragons, as soon as that first flush is done and they're starting to set seed pods, but before they get too developed, I cut the plant back, way back to maybe 3-4 inches above ground level, so that that old flower stalk is cut off. And what that does is they send out whole new growth, and in a few weeks, maybe accompany it with a little fertilizer too. Give it a little water-soluble fertilizer. And then pretty soon, in a couple of weeks, you've got brand new shoots coming, and you'll get another flush of very beautiful blossoms. Now, this one's got kind of a different name, Verbena, and then from the species of Verbena bonariensis, and the cultivar name was Vanity. Now, these are very interesting. Notice the way that the flowers, the lavender flowers, almost kind of float up above. And this would be a little too sprawling for a planter or a container, but in a flower bed, maybe a mixed flower bed where you've got some perennials, this is really, really pretty. A neat texture, a neat flower shape. And the Celosia Kilos Candela Pink. The picture here, supplied by All America Selections, really is nice. Notice the way that the pink flowers, the spike-shaped flowers, kind of catch that almost a fluorescent pink. Really, really nice. And Celosia does very well in hot temperatures. So these last couple of summers that were very, very hot were good summers for Celosia. This does very nice in a planter as well, a mixed planter along with other things. The Celosia will give you a little bit of height in the planter, and then you can plant some trailing things around the outer perimeter. Celosia Kilos Candela Pink. Now, of all the recent All-America Selection winners that we've grown and tried and put in our display garden, this is probably my favorite. Now, this photo is from our own yard, right in front of our, kind of in front of our house. I think it was the planter right by the front door. Now, I put a label in. I mentioned to you that our flower gardens are a display garden for All America Selections, and they send labels for them. And so I sent the All America Selection this photo, and it actually made it onto the All America Selection site. Now, not because the photo is so fancy, but because it really captures that look. The yellow intensity of bee's knees petunia is just terrific. It is, gosh, it's just so bright and sunny and cheery. The other thing that is so dramatic about it is that it stays so beautifully compact for in a planter. Now, we planted these both in the planter, several planters, and also in the ground flower beds. It really did beautifully, especially in containers. And it rounded itself out. We planted some pots, large pots, totally with bee's knees petunia, and they were dramatic, rounded itself out. Now, this planter that you see here, the photo, actually is a mixed planter. There are some little kind of pom-pom mums in there and some sweet potato vine, and it did very, very well. But again, really nice all on its own. It stayed husky and well-branched all summer long. It never got sprawly. I didn't have to cut it back, didn't have to trim it. Really, really nice. Now, bee's knees petunia is a petunia that is propagated vegetatively. That means it is produced by cuttings. So there is not seed available for it. So if you go to the garden catalog and look for bee's knees petunia, you'll see that they're selling plants of it. Garden centers will hopefully handle pots of bee's knees petunias. So anyway, a person can't get seed though. It does need to be purchased by plants. And the way that the greenhouses produce it is by cuttings. Now, here is an old All-America Selection winner that for Mary and I was our best marigold, getting maybe about 20 inches tall for flower beds or larger planters, because it just had such a beautiful, bright, sunny looking rounded flower head. And for years and years, I didn't think anything was ever going to replace First Lady Marigold. I think it was a winner from maybe the 1950s, but I was wrong. Along came the All-America winner called Big Duck Yellow. And this is my new favorite large flowered marigold. And this picture is in our own flower beds. And I think it might be Carmen Wave Petunia behind it in a flower bed. But gosh, just look at the round, full flowers on that. Big Duck Yellow Marigold. And of course, you can get seed of this, or the garden centers maybe have it too, but you can raise this from seed. The seed is readily available. We enjoyed also planting it beside something blue. Just the yellow and blue looks so nice. The blue in the photo is blue Victoria salvia. I don't have a slide of that farther down, but I could have included Victoria salvia as one of our good old standbys. Isn't that pretty? Kind of the combination of the two. Again, Big Duck Yellow Marigold for something that would be 18 to 20 inches tall. Could go in a large container for something with a little height. But again, that's one that I really sing the praises of. Now, the Big Duck series also had gold, a golden one, which is a little deeper shade than Big Duck Yellow. Big Duck Yellow is still my favorite. There was also an orange in the series that you can see further to the background. This was a photo supplied by the All-America Selections Committee. But also the form and everything is just beautiful. But again, my favorite was the Big Duck Yellow, just because it was so cheery. All right, the next from a few years ago is Asian Garden Celosia. Now, this did very well for us, and it's got a nice kind of unique flower head and kind of a unique color to it. And like all celosias, it does so very, very well in full sun and a spot where, where it maybe gets a fair amount of heat. So a planter or flower bed on the south side or southwest side would do very, very well. It does well in a planter. For something a little bit high, kind of a feature that's a little high towards the back or the center of a planter, and then with something low growing around the front of that. Here was another very pretty All-America Selection winner called Superhero Spry. Now, the two-tone flower color is really, really nice. And this one did very well in our flower beds. There's a lot of All-America Selection winners that we could have talked about, but I focused tonight here on those that were just absolutely stunning in our flower beds. This was one of them. Now, it's a very little plant, though. It probably only gets about 6 to 8 inches tall. Each flower is maybe around an inch. So this is kind of a miniature little marigold. It would do very well in pots and planters because it is quite small. In flower beds, we had to plant it quite close because they don't really spread out very far. Superhero Spry. Another beautiful, beautiful All-America Selection winner is the Mega Bloom series of flowering vinca. Look at the size of the blossoms on that. Isn't that awesome? Now, I really like flowering vinca because they also do so well where it's hot. They don't mind getting a little bit dry, full sunshine. Boy, in these last several summers, we've had plenty of heat and plenty of dryness and plenty of full sun. So I love this one. Comes in a few different colors. A beautiful magenta also. Beautiful. The Mega Bloom series of flowering finca. You know, those were the All-America selection, new, relatively new. You know, it's interesting. When we say something is new in gardening, you know, really, if it's within the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years or so, it's considered new because, you know, some of these varieties go way, way back. I mentioned the First Lady Marigold, a nice All-American winner, like I say, from maybe the 50s. So things that when we call them new, sometimes they just aren't like a year or so. Sometimes, you know, within the last 5, 6 years or so. Okay, now you've probably all recognized that pot and logo, the Proven Winners line of plants. Proven Winners has brought together a number of plant breeders to create some very, very interesting new type of things. And among those new things are all kinds of different coleus. It's good times for coleus in the flower gardens. And of course, these are so nice for planters and containers in the shade. Some of them do well in sun too. But some of the new Proven Winners varieties, and we don't even need to know the names of these specific ones, because when you go to the garden center and kind of go out to the shaded area where you'd find the coleus, you'll find all these different colors, and they do have cultivar names as well. But wow, look at that one. It almost has a fiery intensity, doesn't it, to that color. And these photos, I think, are very representative of the of those. Beautiful, good times. Good times for coleus. Sweet potato vines. Now, sweet potato vine has been around a long, long time, the ornamental vines. And the one you see there on the left is kind of the traditional one that's been around a long time. They do so well as kind of an accent, something vining to go in a container with the flowering type things. But plant breeders have been busy and there are new colors. This dark one, dark colored, yeah, it's been around a while, a number of years, but it gives us something more to try. There's even one that kind of is a little bit of a pinkish burgundy look. And here's one that's relatively new, is a sweet potato vine that has those serrated leaves. That's one I haven't tried yet. So that's on my wish list to try that sweet potato vine. Excuse me. Now, along with the, again, with the Proven Winners line of plants, this is a super, just a great, well, yeah, it's called Supertunia. Supertunia Vista Petunia series. These do so beautifully in hanging baskets, planters. You could use them in a mixed planter, or look at that hanging basket. That is Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. Look at how just, you know, there are massive blooms. So good times. You know, my wife Mary and I had a garden center for 25 years. And that was before the dawn of all these new petunias. The wave petunias were just being invented about the time that we quit the garden center. But for hanging baskets, the old Cascade petunias were used. But wow, we're living in good times for annual flowers. But what beautiful, beautiful. I can't say enough good things about some of these. So when you're when you're at the garden centers, you will see these supertunias and several different colors. There, the beautiful one on the right is called Jazzberry. Okay, that was the last kind of those Proven Winners varieties. So for annual flowers, that kind of ends the brand new ones, but new doesn't always mean that that's the only thing there is. So I wanted to include some good old favorites that are good old favorites for a reason, because they do so well and they merit continued planting. And one of those is Cleome, sometimes called spider flower. Cleome is beautiful. If you want something tall and dramatic in either a flower bed, an annual flower bed, or a perennial flower bed, where you're looking kind of for something season-long color, Cleome does really, really well. Now, they will easily get about 4 feet tall or so, or maybe even 5 feet tall. So definitely something for the background. These are too large for planters. There is a smaller variety of this called sparkler, which will be maybe more in the 3 foot, 2.5 foot. But the standard Cleome, the old time favorite is the Queen series: Rose Queen, White Queen, Pink Queen, Mixed Queen. Um, of the sparkler series, the dwarf, the seed are really, really expensive, and I don't know, I still kind of like the tall one. They're so beautiful. And one of our favorites for our front porch, on either side of the front door where it gets good shade, nonstop begonias. They are so pretty. We raise those from seed. We've got the seed going now in our basement under fluorescent lights because they do take a long time. But these are available from garden centers also as started plants. Nonstop begonias are so beautiful. Isn't that nice? Can I tell you a little secret about nonstop begonias? So if you purchase begonias like this, or kind of a relative of those, here's a little tip that Professor Neil Holland, our horticulture professor at NDSU, and later he went on to own and operate Cheyenne Gardens in Harwood. But anyway, old Professor Neil Holland, this was probably, oh gosh, I bet this was almost 45 years ago, maybe it's pushing 50, that he told me, because these were brand new, and we were transplanting them in the greenhouse, little plants, and he said, now, when you get these home, it was fun. I was a student and we got to take home some of the extras. So he said, okay, now when you get these home, make sure you plant them so that the leaf is pointing in the direction that you want the flowers to face. Okay, for example, our porch, the planters are one-sided. Okay, so you can only see the flowers from one side. The flowers face in the same direction that the leaf points. So where we need the flowers to be visible from the outside, the leaves have to be pointing to the outside. If we didn't do that, the flowers would all be facing the porch wall, if you follow me. So it's kind of fun. When you buy these and plant these, make sure, just as old Professor Neil Holland told me, make sure you point the leaf in the direction that you want the flowers to appear, because that's the way they do it. And so you notice these also, those flowers are peeking out and pointing in the same direction that the leaf faces. Cosmos, lots of new Cosmos varieties, but they're all nice. They kind of have kind of a fluffy appearance. The foliage is very fine, quite carefree. The pollinators love them. The butterflies love Cosmos. There's some nice new ones you can look. Easy to grow from seed, too. Dusty Miller, the silver leaf. If you're looking for something for the edge of a flower bed or a silver accent to put in a planter, the Dusty Miller accomplishes that so very, very well. Gomphrena, sometimes called globe amaranth. We can't touch the little blossoms, but if we did, you would feel they're just like papery. They almost dry right on the plant. So this is something you could really use for a dried bouquet because the colors the color is retained quite well on these. There's all kinds of different colors and heights on Gomphrena. They love it hot and dry. Gomphrena, sometimes called globe amaranth. For those of you that tour the NDSU display gardens in the summertime on the west edge of campus, there's always a fairly good-sized planting of a number of different Gomphrenias. And this is one of my favorites. Lisianthus. Have you grown Lisianthus? Aren't they beautiful? Look, almost like roses. Now, Lisianthus is a little hard to start from seed. They have to be started really, really early. almost in January. And so I prefer to buy these at the garden center. Garden centers do sell Lysianthus. It's an annual. And boy, isn't that pretty? And there's all kinds of different colors, whites and rose-colored, pinks, purple. Lysianthus. If you'd like to plant something in either a flower bed or a container, I suppose, if you want to plant something that people going by will ask, what is that? Well, Lysianthus is that type of flower. Sweet peas. Sweet peas, gosh, I remember my mom always having sweet peas along the garden fence. They aren't so terribly showy, maybe. I mean, in the picture here, they look great. But I mean, this isn't something from the street that people would notice. But sweet peas are so nice on a fence or trellis, especially for cutting. And the old-fashioned types have an aroma that is absolutely out of this world. The fragrance of those, cut a little bouquet and take it in, and that is good times, the fragrance of sweet peas. Oh, one thing I should mention though, sweet peas like it cool. So sometimes in the heat of the summer, they'll sometimes go out of bloom, but the key to sweet peas is planting them very, very early, seeding them at the base of your fence or trellis, seeding them in April. They'll tolerate some frost, but they need to come up in cool soil and soak the seed overnight first. It's about pea size, like the edible pea size, but they're a very hard seed. And so soak overnight first, and then, yeah, plant in April, and you'll enjoy some good flowers. The next is that large kind of purplish leaves, big tropical looking thing. It almost looks like a shrub, doesn't it? But that is the annual called castor bean. Castor bean. Now they'll easily get 6 feet tall. They're rapid growing, maybe even taller than 6 feet. They're very, very rapid growing. They grow from seed. You can either seed them direct out into the flower bed or start them early indoors. They grow fast, so they only maybe need starting 2 to 3 weeks ahead in a pot. But isn't that pretty? There's both a green leaf as well as the kind of purplish leaf, and they're pretty. Now, castor bean seeds are very, very poisonous, highly poisonous. But there's an easy way to make sure nothing bad happens. And that is just cut off those spent flowers before they set seed. As long as it doesn't set seed, then no animals, no kids, or anything can be exposed to that. So there's an easy way to eliminate the danger with that. So if you're ever looking for something, maybe in the back or a corner, plant castor bean. It'll fill up that area and give a tropical look to an otherwise empty space. This is one you don't see very often, but it's well worth planting. It's Euphorbia marginata. It's an annual coming, it doesn't winter. It's frost tender. And some garden centers do sell this. A common name for it is snow and summer or annual snow and summer. Snow and summer is used for a number of different plants, that common name, but it's really, really pretty. Isn't that dramatic? The white and green. It doesn't have a showy flower necessarily, but it's the white and green foliage. Isn't that pretty? One of my favorites, and this is a picture out of her own flower bed, lemon gem marigold. Lemon gem marigold. Lemon gem has been around for a long time, but it makes a beautiful little mound, a perfect little mound shape. It looks so nice with the blue Victoria salvia. Now here is also in one of our flower beds. Doesn't that make a nice little hedge? Lemon gem marigold. The foliage is kind of almost fern-like, and the little flowers just cover that mound. And isn't that nice? That would do very well in a pot or planter also. It likes the heat. It doesn't mind it if things dry out a little bit. Lemon gem marigold, one of my favorites. Been around a long time, but well worth continued planting. This is a window box at the back of our house, the kitchen windows. Sophie Cascade geranium. Now, these are geraniums that we've maintained the cuttings ever since we closed down our greenhouse 20, probably, gosh, going on 20 years ago. But we maintained plants and cuttings of these. Now, the Sophie Cascade is a window box type of geranium, could be used in other planters too. But these were developed in Germany. And in Germany, of course, they love their window boxes, things cascading over. Sophie Cascade geranium. Now, what's fun, when Mary and I went shopping at garden centers last year, we saw Sophie Cascade. I was afraid they had been lost and maybe weren't being sold anymore. But we found Sophie Cascade at one of the garden centers. We already had our own, but I was so happy to see that other people could be enjoying Sophie Cascade geranium. Now, another beautiful one that has done well in our flower gardens is the Zahara series of zinnia. Now, these grow fairly short. By fairly short, I mean, maybe 10 inches, less than a foot in height, but the color is so nice. And of this one, Zahara Starlight Rose zinnia. So kind of a nice for either planters or a flower bed. Zahara works really, really well. And there's other colors of that Zahara too. You'll notice earlier in our program, I mentioned the Profusion series of zinnias. And this is kind of like that a little bit. Zahara Starlight Rose zinnia. Dragon wing begonias have been around for a while. Anybody try those? Dragon wing begonias make a beautiful hanging basket or planter. Now, I mentioned some of the new varieties of coleus from both the proven winners and the All-America. One of my favorite, and it's relatively new, called the Kong coleus, K-O-N-G, Kong coleus. They have absolutely huge leaves, and it's fun to have them just because the size of the leaf is so huge. All right, now we're going to leave the annuals behind, and we're going to talk about perennials for a little bit. Now, on perennials, we're going to talk about the old favorites first because, new perennials are wonderful. Anyway, perennials, I'm just noticing the chat just to make sure. Okay, super. Thank you guys for adding questions and things into the chat or the Q&A because we'll address any questions towards the end. So now perennials, new is wonderful, but there are some old time perennials that just deserve being a backbone in our flower gardens. And peonies, of course, is one of those. Gosh, what perennial garden would be without some of the nice, beautiful peonies? And bleeding heart is another one. For shade or semi-shade, morning sun, afternoon shade, bleeding heart. Such a good long-lived perennial. That plant like that's going to be around for 100 years. Bearded iris, also called German iris. Now, iris need dividing really every 4 or 5 years, but by doing that dividing, a person will have those iris for a century. And there's so many colors. This is one out of our own flower garden. Isn't that pretty? Beautiful. There's so many to choose from. These were a couple others out of our flower garden. The colors are so nice, you could just reach out and touch them. Besides the German bearded iris, there's also the type of iris called Siberian iris. There's a few others called Spirea iris as well. Now, notice the more narrow strap-like leaves on these. Even when these aren't blooming, these strap-like leaves are quite dramatic. So in a perennial garden, even when the flowers are past, they make a very dramatic, showing, almost like an ornamental grass. And so they look good even when the blossoms have passed. Here's another good old favorite called Bergenia. These are one of the first things to bloom in the spring, usually in May or so. And the leaves are broad and look almost tropical. They also stay almost semi-evergreen in the wintertime if you take a look. Now, if you want something that'll last for a long, long time in the perennial garden, gas plant, Dictamnus. Gas plant. It doesn't like to be disturbed. So once you've got that in place, it'll last a long, long time. Now, why is it called gas plant? The flowers exude a kind of an oil, a gas that is actually flammable. And so if on a very calm summer night, when there's not even a hint of whisper, if you hold a match at the base of the flower stalk, the gas will actually flame up. I first saw that probably, I don't know, 45 years ago. Professor Neil Holland out. I used to help him with his yard when I was a student, and he had a gas plant. And on a nice, beautiful evening, he said, "Here, let me show you what happens." And he held his cigarette lighter underneath, and poof. So I saw it with my own two eyes. It's fun. And of course, hosta. Gosh, we could spend a couple hours talking about just all the different hosta varieties, but suffice it to say that they all do well, very well in shade. Some were developed for the sun. Gosh, all the different colors, blues, yellows, double, greens, yellows. There's a little something for everybody in hosta. Also, the size, the width, and the height of them also. Joe Pye weed. Another perennial, long-lived Joe Pye weed. I've often thought that needs a new marketing director because anything called a weed isn't necessarily an attractive name. So Joe Pye weed, there's both a kind of a dwarf type. The dwarf type will actually get probably at least 4 feet. The standard type of Joe Pye weed can probably get up to 6 feet. This is one of my favorite perennials called giant fleece flower, or Persicaria. I love the Latin name of this one because it kind of rolls off your tongue. Persicaria polymorpha, giant fleece flower. It becomes almost like a shrub. Each spring, of course, though, it comes back from the base, as all our perennials do, comes back from the base and grows to this height. This is in our own yard, and it will get, if I was standing beside that, it will easily be 6 feet tall, and I'm not quite 6 feet, so it usually towers over me. It looks really, really well. It's one of the types of things when that's in bloom, people will ask, what type of shrub is that? But again, it's a true perennial. Garden phlox, the tall garden phlox, so many different colors and shades. And the mums for the fall bloom. Mums are hard to beat. This is the mammoth mum series, which is a little more winter hardy than some of them. In a minute, I'll show you another mum type that I'm trying as well. Mammoth mums were developed by the University of Minnesota. Oh, well, here's the one that I'm trying, the Igloo mum series. I bought it from a own garden center as a trial for a mum that will have a little more winter hardy series possibility. And mums, if you want them to become a perennial, they need to be planted in the spring. They need the entire season to develop good roots and to develop a good enough crown to winter well. And these were planted, the igloo yellow, they were planted in the spring, and by fall, they made a very beautiful rounded plant. Now, this is the first winter that they will hopefully survive. So in the spring, we'll see if igloo has been fully winter hardy for our area. It's also available in a very nice burgundy color. Fall asters, the purple dome aster. It's fun to have something in the perennial garden that actually will develop that much color in the fall of the year when some of the other perennials are winding down. Now, this photo is from our own yard. I love the fall, how the fall colors, even some of the subtle colors start developing. Notice, of course, the sedum in the foreground. Let's see, it's Amber Jubilee 9 bark kind of in the middle. And there's a little pop of purple, and that is the purple dome aster. Right beside it is a peony, which even in the fall, kind of the subtle brown tones of a peony, the coppery color looks nice too. But anyway, it's kind of fun in an arrangement like that to locate that pop of color. Silver brocade artemisia. It almost looks like Dusty Miller, the annual type, but this one is a winter hardy perennial, kind of creeps along the grounds or something that you'd like to fill in among the others, the other perennials, silver brocade artemisia. And Monarda, also called bee balm. There's lots of nice new varieties of that one too. Now, if you'd like to try a relatively new peony, this one called Bartzella. It's actually a series called the Ito, Itoh, Ito peonies. These are slightly different than our traditional old-fashioned garden peony. They've got a slightly different leaf, and the flower color is quite different. So there are a number of different cultivars of the Ito peonies. Now, next we have the Veronica, also called Speedwell. Very beautiful. And I love the name of this one, Milk and Honey Astilbe. And of course, the Astilbes are available in all kinds of color shades, all the way from red to pink to rose, and the white as well, Astilbe. And no perennial garden would be the same without echinacea, the coneflowers. There are lots of many different shades of the echinacea. Now, echinacea isn't maybe as long-lived of a perennial. You know, it's not going to be in the same place for 100 years like a peony, but they're well worth planting. Even if it survives 4 or 5 years, they're well worth planting. And of course, perennials can be divided into two groups, those that maybe don't live as long, but well worth planting, and those that live many, many years. We can learn to enjoy and plant both. Daylilies. I always get excited about daylilies. And of course, daylily, the photo there on the left, is Stella d'Oro. Now, Stella d'Oro, I mean, I love all flowers, but Stella d'Oro I got a little bit tired of because Stella d'Oro is in front of every doctor's office and every bank in most of the tri-state area, but it's pretty. And so in a minute, I'm going to show you kind of some improvements. And also, if your idea of daylilies was your grandmother's that actually kind of spread maybe a little weed-like and had kind of a small flower, if those two are your impressions of daylilies, boy, we're in good times for daylilies because we've got all new varieties with great big blossoms. This is one of my favorites out of our own perennial garden called Buttered Popcorn Daylily. Well, besides having kind of a neat name, the flower color and substance is so intense you can almost reach out and touch it, can't you? Great big blossoms. And there are so many beautiful, beautiful ones. This is another example. I'd have to look at the tag on that to see which this was. This was out of our own flower garden, but look at the look at the ruffles on that. That's the texture, the neat color. This is one out of our own flower garden called Mauna Loa. Look at the fiery color on those. Boy, good times for daylilies. Now, true lilies. Now, daylilies aren't a true lily because the daylilies come from just kind of an enlarged root. True lilies grow from a bulb that's underneath the ground. And the ones in the photo here are called Asiatic lilies. They're the hardiest of the lilies. And also, they're kind of upward facing, lots of different colors on those. So they're well worth planting. But also, there are some other beautiful lilies, maybe not quite as winter hardy. So put these in a little bit of a microclimate or give them a little bit of mulch over winter. Trumpet and Orion pet lilies. So when you're kind of shopping around for lilies in the garden center or the garden catalog, you'll see these. Now, these are out of our own perennial flower garden, and they have a wonderful fragrance. Great big, huge, excuse me, great big, huge trumpet-shaped blossoms. Aren't those just absolutely beautiful? They're available in a number of different colors too. Beautiful, beautiful. They can get quite tall. Some of these, I think we have a photo, Mary and I standing beside some of these that are taller than either Mary or I. This is one called Golden Splendor. Again, true lilies that grow from a bulb underneath ground. Now, let's talk about some more new cultivars. This is a Russian sage. Some of the new varieties have a little more intense flower color than the old, and also they tend not to have the spreading habit. The old original Russian sage could get to be a little bit problematic because it liked to kind of spread. The newer cultivars are less apt to do that. Now, perennial salvia cultivars. This one called May Night has been around for quite a while at garden centers. My gosh, there's been some nice new ones. This is one of my favorite perennial blue salvias, and it happened to be an All-America Selection winner. They declare a limited number of perennials as All-America Selection winners too. Annual flowers and vegetables are their big thing, but they named this one All-America Selection Blue Bayou. I guess kind of a play on Blue Bayou, Blue Bayou Salvia. Now, in our own flower gardens, this really, really did well. The first year, it bloomed beautifully, and I'm hoping it'll winter really well. Up on campus, they did winter very, very well, but this was the first year that I had this one. So stay tuned. Oh, now here's a beauty, relatively new, a winter hardy hibiscus. And gardeners around the area have sent in photos and put on Facebook of how beautiful these are. It's a proven winner line called the Summerific series. Now, garden centers do sell the plants of this, and just beautiful colors. They kind of make a rounded shrub. Some of the particular varieties have flowers the size of a big dinner plate. Others have maybe smaller flowers, but more of them. So the Summerific series of hardy hibiscus. There's a new phlox variety, the tall garden phlox, called the Luminary Phlox series. And what's especially nice about this is they don't have some of the mildew problems that some of the other phlox varieties have that cause the foliage to go downhill. So this is well worth examining at the garden center's Luminary. So another thing that I like to do when I'm in the garden center shopping for perennials, whether it be phlox or Monarda is another one susceptible to foliage diseases, look at the tag. And if they say developed for disease resistance, you know that's one of their strong selling points. If it doesn't say anything about disease resistance, maybe that wasn't something worth mentioning. So in phlox and Monarda, I really look for disease resistance on the descriptions. Anybody grow Brunera? This is a new one called Jack of Diamonds. Aren't those pretty? Isn't that a pretty looking leaf? Now they do well in, excuse me, they do well in shade or part sun, part shade, but are really a unique. There are some different color shades too of this one. This one's called Jack of Diamonds. Now, on my bucket list, I want to have grown everything that we can possibly grow in North Dakota. Trees, shrubs, perennials. And what I always like to say is, I've got a long ways to go yet, which speaks to the large volume of plants that we can actually grow in our area. So if you ever listen to my webinars, I never say, oh gosh, we live in a harsh climate or a challenging climate, or, our winters are so severe on our plants. You never hear me talking about that because on my bucket list, I want to grow everything that we could grow, and I've got a lot of plant material left to try. And this is one of them, Brunera. I don't have any of these, so I've got to get me some of those. Serendipity allium. The alliums are so pretty. Winter hardy. They're in the onion family, of course, ornamental onions. And there's a number of different cultivars of those that you'll find at the garden center, slightly different shades, slightly different heights. Now here, the next couple of perennials, fairly new, I threw in because not only they do beautifully, but the naming people went all out on these and developed some very unique names. So this salvia is called Back to the Fuchsia. I've not tried this one, but those salvia are generally quite winter hardy, and I've got to try this one. Another one that the naming people have been creative. This is the Wizard of Oz. Veronica Speedwell. Oz as in, that's nice. Wizard of Oz, Veronica Speedwell. Quite a nice, intense blue color to that. Another one, Cat's Pajamas, Nepeta Cat Mint. Now, the cat mints are really, really nice, good winter hardy perennials. Now, Cat's Pajamas is one that is in some of the city of Fargo's perennial flower beds. So each year when that's blooming, I'll have people send me photos of what is this? It's so beautiful. Now, the ornamental grass is so beautiful in a perennial flower garden or mixed in the landscape with your shrubs. This is Black Hawk's big blue stem. And of course, big blue stem is one of our prairie grasses. So blue stem, fully winter hardy, quite dramatic. It's always fun to see the seed heads when they raise up. And garden centers are selling big Black Hawk, big blue stem, as well as a few other varieties too of big blue stem and little blue stem. This is an interesting one, Gone with the Wind, prairie drop seed, another ornamental grass. Blue whiskers, blue fescue. Blue fescue is quite dramatic in a flower garden, in amongst other green, dark green things. It doesn't grow very tall, maybe a foot or so in our experience, but it gives a nice blue, silvery blue contrast. Now, this is one of my favorites. This photo was in our own perennial garden, Korean feather reed grass. We purchased at a local garden center. It's fully winter hardy. It makes a nice dramatic effect. Starts with seed heads in the last half of summer. And then those seed heads stay on all winter long. So you even have some dramatic effect in the winter landscape. Gosh, so good times for ornamental grasses. That could be an hour program all on its own. Now, I do want to mention that we, NDSU Extension, cooperating with Form Communications, developed a year ago. So we have almost 50, probably 52 or 53 episodes of this called Growing Together, a Gardening Podcast. And these appear on Spotify and YouTube and Apple and almost anywhere where you kind of pull up some podcasts, you can find Growing Together, a Gardening Podcast. The forum's John Lamb and I co-host each week. We enjoy talking gardening. And so if while you're doing something, you enjoy listening to a podcast, maybe check that out. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions at all, I'll leave my email address there. And let's take a look and see. There are a few questions here, so let me go to these. Are any of these classified as rabbit or deer resistant? No. Here's why I say no. I never give lists of rabbit and deer repellent plants, and here's why. I've carefully looked at lists. So when I search rabbit and deer resistant plants, and also sometimes I include university, because then that brings some of the research university lists up. So you can get these lists, but when I look at them, on almost all those lists, I've thought to myself, well, the deer ate that one in our yard, or the rabbits nibbled that way down. So the problem with those rabbit and deer resistant lists is that they don't apply. Maybe rabbits and deers have different tastes in different areas. But I would hate to recommend something as being deer resistant and then next year have the deer eat it. So anyway, if there's something that tended to be a little less apt to be eaten by deer, the salvia is one of them. But I'm sure of the 180 of you, there's probably somebody that said, well, gosh, they ate mine. And also the alliums. But it's probably better to try to protect these things as you can with repellents or something. But the salvia, with their fragrance, and also the alliums. Otherwise, I am hard pressed to prepare a list of rabbit or deer resistant plants. Let's see, how high in inches? Okay, hopefully I covered how high the flowers were. I was trying to keep that in mind. Thank you, Larry. How can we find out the date times of summer tours? Well, summer tours, probably one of the best ways is to do an online search, NDSU extension Cass County. And we do try to put everything on that. NDSU extension Cass County takes you to a site that has an events page. And so we try to post the tours on that. Next question, would you do a presentation on growing fruits and vegetables in a garden, such as strawberries, raspberries, potatoes, beans? Yes. I do these webinars on kind of a three or 4 year. And growing fruits, I'm actually going to do next year. I wasn't able to work it in this year yet, but so actually next year I am going to be doing that. I don't have one planned for this year yet. Okay, next question. All your petunias are so full. How do you keep them from sprawling? Okay, two things. First of all, certain varieties are just tailor-made to stay compact, and that's why they were developed. That one called Bee's Knees, the yellow one, that just stays compact. And the Supertunia Vista series, Vista Bubblegum, Jazzberry, those were selected to maintain quite compact. If you chose some of the other wave petunias, they're beautiful in a flower garden because they sprawl so beautifully, but in a planter, they might get a little sprawly. But if even if some of the varieties that are supposed to stay more compact, if they do a little bit of sprawling by the middle of summer, petunias respond very well to trimming back. Just trim back some of the sprawly parts and at the same time, give them some water-soluble fertilizer. And that will help encourage new bushy growth. Also, petunias, especially kind of the wave type and the hanging basket petunias, container petunias, are heavy feeders, meaning that really every 2 weeks or so, they'd like a nice water-soluble fertilizer or mix a timed release, slow release fertilizer in when you pot them up. The most common name of that is the Osmocote brand. And so heavy feeders will help them to, being heavy feeders and fertilizing in response will help them to produce plenty of good growth. Do sweet potato vines tolerate heat and some dryness? Yes. Well, if they get dryness, they'll let you know it because sweet potato vines will really wilt. If you catch them in time, they'll re-moisturize themselves. But heat they love. The ornamental sweet potatoes are in the same genus and species as the edible sweet potatoes, which love it down south. So they love the heat. The hotter, the better. And so sweet potato vines love that, but we do have to watch the dryness because they will wilt. They're a fairly succulent vine. Okay, next question. Emily asks, are the Sophie Cascade geraniums shade tolerant? Do they have a strong fragrance? The Sophie Cascade geraniums, if you didn't know that they were geraniums, you'd almost not recognize them because they have a total different leaf than the standard geraniums as we know them. And they're a waxier, shinier leaf, kind of unique to themselves. And they don't have the strong fragrance that, when you rub a standard geranium, they have that strong fragrance. The Sophie Cascade and its relatives don't have that strong fragrance. Do they tolerate shade? Not full shade, so not 100%. But if they were getting, morning sun and afternoon shade, they would do well. At our house, they're getting afternoon sun, the rest of the day kind of shade, and then get afternoon sun. I'd rather they got the opposite because the afternoon sun is often hot, and geraniums, as a rule, don't like it that hot. They like it kind of cool. So, but we can't turn our house, 180 degrees. So they would actually be happier morning sun and afternoon shade. What type of mulch do you like to use in your flower beds? I love shredded bark. Shredded bark just makes such a nice mulch over the perennial gardens and around shrubs even. And when I say shredded, Wood chips by themselves tend to kind of float and blow a little bit, but these shredded products nest together well, the particles mesh together well. So I'm a big fan of at least 3 inches of a nice wood type, shredded wood type, shredded bark mulch. My columbine are starting to leaf with the warmer temperatures and lack of snow. I was wondering if many people's things are starting to grow. Is this something you are worried about? What will happen if it gets really cold again? And of course, this is happening to some people's tulips and spring bulbs, especially if they were planted along the foundation or in a spot that gets especially sunny conditions. So Columbine's starting to leaf out, starting to grow a little bit of growth from the base. Now, on the upside, these perennials that do that they've had to kind of come through pretty chilly soil. They're pretty toughened, hardened in. So in the case of tulips, they're usually pretty good unless we're going to get below 0. Your columbine are going to be pretty tough also, so they'll probably be okay. As to what could we do about it? Like if we have tulips coming up or your columbine, what we can't do is put a heavy mulch over those because those leaves have started active growth and they're photosynthesizing and they need sunlight. If we were to cover them deep in a dark mulch, they're going to start stretching and getting spindly under that mulch. So maybe tuck a little mulch around them just to mitigate the chilly temperatures, but don't cover them over entirely. Can the potted mums we see in the fall be planted in the ground and survive? There are certain mum varieties that are known to have a track record of being more winter hardy. The one that I'm trying, my fingers crossed, is the Igloo series. Another one is that Mammoth Mum series developed at University of Minnesota. Another good series is the Minn series, University of Minnesota, like Minn Autumn, Minn Gopher, Minn Ruby, Minn Yellow, Minn White. And they need to be planted to perennialize. They need to be planted in the springtime, and garden centers do sell these starter plants. They need to be planted in the spring so that they have the whole summer to root in good and develop a crown capable of coming through winter okay. So will the ones planted in the fall survive? Some people have had luck. They might be a variety that isn't as winter hardy as some that we could possibly do. And also the planting time isn't exactly optimal, but you don't really have much to lose. So plant them, leave the tops on. It's well documented that leaving the tops on mums to catch a little snow and it improves the chances of winter survival by leaving the tops on. And maybe give them a covering of leaves also, but it's worth a try. I'm always up for trying anything. So potted mum in the fall, I don't think I'd throw it. I'd probably plant it and see what happens. The odds might not be in your favor, but some people have had luck. Next question, Connie asked, is the Ito peony more resistant to white mold? The standard peony, old-fashioned peony, is very susceptible to powdery mildew, is that white mold. And is the Ito peony more resistant? Probably not, maybe slightly more resistant. But if you're troubled with that powdery mildew on peonies, apply a fungicide while they still look good and green. Apply a fungicide as a preventative. 1 or 2 fungicide treatments while they're still green can go a long way for helping. And also don't avoid watering the peonies from the top can help too. Sometimes the mildew happens regardless of how careful you are. How do you prepare your flower beds? Well, for the annual flower beds, I enjoy rototilling because I've got my dad's old rototiller and I kind of just enjoy that old rototiller. So I rototill our flower beds, the annual flower beds. I do rototill those up. I'm looking at some of the no-till flower bed methods. In fact, at one of our upcoming Yard and Garden Palooza, which is April 27th, we're going to have someone talk on no-till annual flower beds. Well, stay tuned. I'll make sure all of you get the information on Garden Palooza. And yeah, so I do rototiller flower beds, the annuals. How do you keep rabbits from eating all your annuals that you plant in the ground? Well, a couple of things. We try to plant enough for them so they can nibble a few and leave plenty for us. But generally, I do apply repellents. My favorite repellents are, and I kind of alternate, plant skid. Garden Center sell these plant skid, which is one used a great deal by the Soil Conservation District. When they plant new little trees, deer and rabbit can ruin new little trees really quickly. They like plant skid, which is a blood-based material. And liquid fence is another one. And Repellex. Those are the three that have some science behind being good repellents. And I know despite any of our best efforts, rabbits can certainly be a problem. I do some trapping also. If I notice that rabbits are working in an area, then I bait a live trap with apples. How do you keep tiger lilies from spreading? The good old tiger lilies, and they do spread. That's a good point and a bad point, depending on your point of view. There's probably not a real good way to keep them from spreading outward, other than to put a fairly deep ring to prevent them. But that's why I know the old tiger lilies are really pretty, but I'm kind of a fan of some of the newer lilies with the great big trumpet blossoms because they tend not to spread. Okay, we're getting towards the end. Brenda asks, phlox, how to be proactive against powdery mildew? Okay, two things. One is if you're going to be planting a new one, look for disease resistance, but also apply a fungicide, an all-purpose flower and garden fungicide. You can just mix it up in a watering can and kind of pour it over the foliage. The trick is to do that while they're still healthy. If you've experienced the mildew in the past, then treat proactively while the foliage is still nice and green. Why are ditch lilies common orange, so unpopular? Helpful in their spread on a railroad property. Yeah, the ditch lilies are pretty. It's kind of fun to see those little orange lilies pop up where you least expect them. Salvia, like Maynite, is cutting back needed for rebloom. Yes, if you cut back as the flower spikes on the perennial salvia, as they do wither, if you cut them back, then they're more apt to come into a bloom. And that variety that I mentioned called Blue Bayou, that is well known for coming back quicker into rebloom than some of the older varieties such as Maynite. All right, last question. Do you use preen or anything for weed prevention in the flower beds? Currently, we don't use preen, although I think I'm going to try it on some of those where I've got some weed problems. You know, the nice thing about our flower gardens or the vegetable gardens, if you can get the little weeds when they're just tiny, then if they don't go to seed, eventually over the years, you can kind of, gain on the problem. You have less weed seeds that will be coming on up. But in the meantime, preen, which is a pre-emergent, you put that down when the soil is still clean, and it kills the weed seeds as they sprout. And so preen can be very, very useful, especially on where you plant annual flowers directly into soil. And it can be active on a perennial garden as well. So preen can give, maybe not 100%, but it can be a good, useful tool to reduce some of the weed. And sometimes when I'm out weeding all these little weeds, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, maybe next year I should do preen. And so, yeah, I'll probably start using a little more of that. There are a couple of keys to activating preen. And if you're familiar with preen, it's sold in the yellow containers with red printing. We've all seen it at the garden centers and national chains. A couple of keys for making the preen most effective. Well, first of all, it has to be put down, when it's clean and free of weeds. and it only prevents those that come up from seed. It won't prevent dandelions coming back from the root, okay? But a couple ways you can get that to be a little more effective, the preen. Immediately after you spread the preen, either work it into the top inch or so of soil. But if you can't do that, then water it in. It needs activation to form a chemical barrier to the seed. So we're watered in. Also, the active ingredient in preen is deactivated by sunlight. So if the little granules of preen sit on the surface for too long, sunlight can diminish the activity of that active ingredient. So that's why it's very important to either incorporate it into the soil a bit, just the surface, or to water it in. Very important. Okay, one more question I see came through. How do you prevent salvia from splitting in the middle and leaning over? Yes, especially with some of the varieties such as Maytime. That is a tendency of the perennial salvia to open up in the middle, and which looks less than attractive. And every few years, they probably need digging and dividing. And the time to dig and divide would be in early spring, just as you're starting a little growth at the base. Dig and divide. Once the clumps get too large, they by nature just tend to start opening like that, especially in the middle of summer. They'll kind of just flop outward. I'm curious if Blue Bayou, the newest almost in that series, I'm curious if that will do that. But the trick seems to be every maybe third year or so to, in the spring, dig and divide so it's a fresh clump on that. Let's see. It looks, I think we've got, let's see, did we get everything? Almost, we're almost there. Okay, review fertilizing plans, coffee grounds, teas. You know, I love coffee grounds, things like that, organic, added to the soil. That's super. I also like the granular fertilizers that a person puts down, and I like the water soluble types. I use really all of those. I need to relocate some lovely true lilies. When and how can I move them? The true lilies from a bulb are probably best moved in the fall of the year and located probably in September, early September. Okay, let's see. What mixture do we use in our pots? I like the Miracle Grow potting mix just because it's so readily available. So that's the potting mix that we use most. But also, garden centers, locally owned garden centers, have mixes that they often use in their greenhouse and their containers. So ask at the local garden center, what do you guys recommend for pots and planters? And they'll oftentimes share and have for sale bags of the mix that they've found. So very, very good. Good. Well, I want to thank you. I think I got most everything. And thank you very much. Thank you all. 119 of you hung on to the bitter end. And thank you again. That was embarrassing to get that tickle in my throat. Thank you again for your patience. And I will email to everyone that participated tonight and registered. I've got your email, and I will email you the upcoming webinars. Again, in 2 weeks from tonight, it's all about tomatoes. And the week after that is shrubbery, helping to choose shrubs for our yards and landscapes. And the following one then is on containers. But I'll make sure all of you get the information for that. Again, thank you all very much. I really enjoy these chats with everyone. And thank you and have a very good evening.